Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Arguments are an inevitable part of any marriage, but when we invite God into our conflicts, He challenges us to approach them in a different way, to approach them better. We're joined by Dr. Greg Popcak, founder and director of CatholicCounselors.com, as well as the host with his bride Lisa of More to Life, that is carried on EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network and produced here at Ave Maria Radio. Greg, great to speak with you again. How are you?
I'm doing well, Marcus. Great to be here.
So, conflicts amongst couples. Now, if there is a perfect couple out there that never has conflicts, I'd love to meet them. But given that the rest of us endure this, teach us, just share with us some of the biblical disciplines of how to fight rightly.
Well, we were talking about this on More to Life, that we often think of conflict as a sign that something is broken. But we like to think of it as an invitation from God to heal the damage that sin has done to our relationships. And, if we take up that invitation and work together with God's grace, we can grow closer to each other because of those conflicts as we respond to them. And I think the first thing that we need to keep in mind is that, usually where arguments go wrong and conflict really bears bad fruit is when we think of anger as a call to action instead of a call to prayer. So you do something that upsets me, and so if I get angry at that and I just let loose with my anger, I'm seeing my anger as a call to action. It's just a reaction to what you did that upset me. But if you do something and I feel angry about that, the first thing I really need to do is bring that to God and say, okay, Lord, Marcus really upset me. And I don't know what to do about that. Help me to know how to respond to him in a way that helps me be my best, that helps me work for his good and for the good of our relationship. So we start there, right? And then I can come to you once I've maybe thought through things a little bit and say, Marcus, when you did that, it really upset me, or I was really hurt by it. I'd like to talk through this and figure out how we can handle it better in the future, right? So there again, we're looking at the distinction that psychologists, in particular John Gottman, makes between a complaint and a criticism. So a complaint is what I just did, where I say, Marcus, when you did that, it really hurt my feelings. I'd like to figure out how we could work together to handle that better in the future. A criticism is where I'm just reacting in anger, like, Marcus, I can't believe you jerk did that to me, and how terrible, and you're awful, and you should go pound salt. Right? So the difference, the difference there is that when it's with a complaint, I'm identifying the problem and I'm asking you to help me with it, even if you're the one who hurt me, right? I'm presuming that that's not your intention and that we can work together through this. With a criticism, you're the problem, and I'm attacking you, and so you're going to get defensive, and we're going to start feeding off of each other at that point. But there's one other thing I'd like to introduce for Christians, right, and for Christian couples in particular. Several years ago, psychologist Eli Finkel did a TED Talk called The Marriage Hack, and he talked about a study that they did at Northwestern University that asked couples to have a difficult conversation. And they divided the couples up into two groups. So the control group, they didn't do anything with. They just said, go have a difficult conversation, have fun. And the experimental group, though, they said, before you have that difficult conversation, we want you both to take a second and imagine somebody that loves you both and wants the best for both of you. How would that person want you to handle this conversation? And then they sent those couples off to have the difficult discussion. What they found was the couples who thought about that person who loved them both and wanted the best for both of them not only did better in that experimental discussion, they continued to see improvements in their marriage for up to a year after the original study.
Wow.
Whereas the control group did not handle those discussions any better and, in fact, started to see their relationships decrease in satisfaction over the course of that year. The thing is, for Christians, we don't have to imagine somebody who loves us both and wants the best for both of us. We have a relationship with that person.
Right.
And so we need to bring those conversations to God. So before we have, as I'm starting the conversation with you or my wife or whoever, assuming that they're open to it, the first thing we need to do is say, okay, Lord, I know what I want, and Marcus knows what he wants, but help us to figure out what you want, and help us to take care of each other while we work to do that. And that's what we really encourage couples at CatholicCounselors.com to do when they're facing serious conversations. To start by saying, all right, I know where I'm at, and they know where they're at, but help us to work together to figure out what you want from us, Lord, and help us to take care of each other while we do that. And that really recenters our hearts and minds on the idea that we're working together to solve the problem. We're not the problem.
Right. And because of that, all of a sudden you're a team working on the issue and actually turning to God for grace, as opposed to trying to correct the other for the sake of remediating the issue?
Well, sure. And you know what? Even if the other person did something hurtful, we can still work together on that, because the presumption here is that you didn't want to hurt me, right? You were trying to express a need or an intention, and you didn't do it the best way. And if you had to do it over again, you'd like to do it better. So I'm assuming that about you. You're assuming that about you. So we can work together against the problem, which is you didn't know how to express that need or concern in a way that I could hear it in that moment. So we're able to not just focus on what happened and who did what to whom, but really concentrate on the next time something like this occurs again, how could we handle it better? And I think there's one other thing I want to throw out here, which is that nobody ever agrees on what really happened. And it's kind of pointless to argue about that. So even the happiest, most loving couples in the world never really agree on who said what or who started it or how did it get going. What we can both agree on, though, is that we didn't like how it went down.
Right.
And so we're going to so instead of re-arguing what happened back then, we're going to focus on when something similar to this happens in the future, how can we work better together next time? So we're not ignoring it. We're not just saying, well, we can't talk about the past. What we're doing is we're using the past as a way of framing future events and working out together how we want to handle those situations differently. And if we can root that, especially in the prayer that I suggested at the beginning of this, where we can go to God and say, all right, Lord, I know what I want, and they know what they want, but help us to figure out what you want and help us to take care of each other while we do that. Now we've got a real system for managing conflict that doesn't drive a wedge between us, but actually invites healing grace into the relationship.
And you've talked about these methods before. I mean, I hear Lisa and you teach this on your program, but you have at least 2 books that address these particular methods of approaching conflict as a couple.
That's right. For Better Forever, A Catholic Guide to Lifelong Marriage is our book that really reviews the Catholic difference in marriage and how couples can really enjoy the benefits that Catholic marriage can give them in every area, from their prayer lives to conflict management to their physical relationship. And then our other book, How to Heal Your Marriage and Nurture Lasting Love, which is really all about working through difficulties and handling challenges more effectively as a couple. And we go into much more detail in both of those books about this whole process that I described to you. Actually, we also talk about it in Praying For and With Your Spouse, which is a book that really talks about how to bring God into every part of our relationship, and so that we can have that, as the Scripture calls it, the 3-ply cord that is not easily broken between me, my wife, and God.
And I love that you mentioned that, because these are some of the things you also talk about in the CatholicHOM app. So just tell us about the app and how couples can find resources for handling conflict on it.
Sure, thank you. In fact, so every week on CatholicHOM, and it's spelled HOM, it stands for Households on Mission. And every week on the CatholicHOM app, we host deeper dive discussions that focus on different topics related to marriage and family life. And this week, we're having a conversation on handling family conflict. And we're talking about 2 things. Most of the places that we learn as adults how to handle conflict comes from the way we were disciplined as children. Because the way we were disciplined as kids teaches us how to deal with offenses. And most of us didn't really learn good habits there. And so this week on CatholicHOM, we're having a discussion about what we call discipleship discipline, which is a gentle approach to conflict and to correction, but that as adults becomes what we like to call CPR, compassionate problem resolution. And so the same steps for correcting kids become the same steps that we can use in navigating difficulties between husbands and wives and other relationships as well. And so on CatholicHOM this week in our deeper dive discussion, we're talking about how to employ both of those models, whether in parenting or in marriage, so that we don't have to be afraid of conflict driving a wedge in the heart of our families, but can see conflict as that invitation to grow closer to God and to each other.
Greg, always a joy, and I'll be very honest, these particular resources that you've put out in the past have been very helpful to my bride and I, so thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. It's a pleasure to hear that, and thank you for having me on today.
My guest has been Dr. Greg Popcak, founder and director of CatholicCounselors.com. He and his bride Lisa host More to Life on EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network and the CatholicHOM app. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.